Hey, welcome back to Crime Time 911. I'm your host, Mel. Today's episode was a special request from my husband, Mike. He had been in Abbotsford, BC during the time that this case was being actively investigated. He remembers hearing about the taunting phone calls that the suspect was making to the police in the news. This is the case of the Abbotsford Killer. I would like to warn you right now that the details of this case are disturbing and might be triggering for some. Please continue with caution. Terry Driver, born on January 25th, 1965 in Vancouver, BC, to a police officer, Grant Driver, and his wife, Audrey Tagg. At the age of 2, he was taken to a doctor because his mother had said that he was a bad child. He broke things, set fires, and didn't respond to any form of discipline. By the time Driver was 5 years old, he was out of control. His parents were unable to handle him, and he was put into a day program for troubled kids. However, this did not help. When Driver was 6 years old, his parents would give up custody of him and handed him over to a local foundation. His behavior would not improve. He would have physical altercations with other children, spit, and would throw things at others as well. I couldn't even imagine what it would have been like for his parents to give up custody of their child, especially at the age of 6. They must have thought they had absolutely no other options at that time. And I have a question. How does a 2-year-old set fire to things? I don't remember my children being able to work a lighter or matches or do anything really to, set a fire at the age of 2. So that I'm not really sure how true that accusation is, but that's just my opinion. Maybe he did. Maybe he was able to do it. I don't know. Driver's violence was particularly focused on females, and it's reported that he even threatened to unalive his own mother. At the age of 9, Driver would be diagnosed with ADHD. It was noted that Driver was belligerent, uncooperative, lacking self-control, and was without conscience. Driver would later claim that between the ages of 9 and 11, he was SA'd by staff at the care home he was placed in. Again, this is all alleged. There's really nothing that I could find that proved that he was or was not SA'd by anybody. At 11 years old, Driver moved back home with his mom and his dad. However, his moving back put such a strain on his parents' marriage that they ended up splitting up. Ultimately, his father would apply for and receive full custody of Driver around the age of 13 years old. Driver's first encounter with police was when he was between the ages of 13 and 14. He got a hold of his father's firearm and shot a round through a neighbor's window. Around the same time that this incident had occurred, another neighbor would report that their house was egged and that rocks were thrown at the windows. Even though Driver was not charged for these incidences, he was now on police's radar. According to a childhood acquaintance of Driver who would spend time at the Driver house playing children's games like hide and seek, there was a room in the Driver's basement that was full of mannequins. Apparently, there were other rooms in the house that also gave this acquaintance a creepy vibe. As an adult, I would definitely find a room full of mannequins creepy as hell. I can't even imagine how scary it would have been for a child to stumble across a room like that. No thanks. It was also said that there was another room in the house that was more or less a shrine to I don't want to say the word again because YouTube and other platforms tend to suppress content with certain words, but it was a shrine to the Germans back in the day when they were capturing all the people for being Jewish. There was allegedly all kinds of this kind of memorabilia in this particular room, on display, almost like it, was a museum, including another mannequin that was in a full SS uniform. Now, SS was the elite guard of that regime, and allegedly, Driver's grandfather had been part of this guard. Sounds like a great family history, doesn't it? By the age of 17, Driver began to break into homes. He claimed to have averaged one break-in per week. When he was 18, he worked for a local cafe. It's alleged that driver gave food to young women of the night in exchange for intimate acts. When driver stole $400 from his boss, he was fired. Then a week later, the cafe was broken into and another $500 was stolen. No charges were ever laid in the break-in, as there was no evidence that driver had committed this act, even though police suspected that he was the one who did it. There was another incident where driver would bang on the back door of the cafe. His former boss thought that something felt off when he heard the banging, so he and a friend would go out the front of the cafe, walk around to the back, and found driver hiding behind a dumpster holding a steel bar, waiting for his boss to come out the back door. You really have to wonder if the fact that his father was a police officer played a part in why driver had never been charged for his crimes, or why he was sort of, let off on these crimes, no punishment whatsoever, which could have contributed to the confidence driver would have later on. Driver's small crimes increased. He would shoplift and break into vehicles. However, still no charges were ever laid in any of these incidences. He was once caught by police after an unsuccessful home invasion and would be charged, but then those charges would be stayed. So a stay of proceedings is a ruling by the court in civil and criminal procedure that halts further legal process in a trial or other legal proceedings. Allegedly, driver became obsessed with cops. He applied to become a cop twice, but thankfully was not accepted. Instead, he bought a police scanner to listen to any exciting police activity in the area. He would often use the scanner to attend the crime scenes as the police worked them as a thrill. I question, how can you become so obsessed with being a cop or policeman in general when you've already committed so many acts as a teenager? I know that breaking and entering and shoplifting and all that can be considered like small petty crimes, but still, I just don't get it. Eventually, driver would meet Val, who he would marry and have 2 children with. It's said that driver was Val's first romantic relationship and that she was 32 when she met driver. Driver would commit a series of DV acts on his wife and his children. On October 13th, 1995, Misty Cockrell and Tanya Smith were walking to a party that wasn't far from Misty's home. Given that it was Friday the 13th, the girls had joked that they might meet a maniac. I'm sure they would later come to regret that joke. All of a sudden, driver jumped out from behind a nearby hedge, wielding a baseball bat. He ordered the girls to go through the bush with him. After they stumbled out of the bushes into a dark parking lot, which happened to be close by the local hospital, driver ordered the girls to remove their clothing. Tanya proceeded to remove her clothing, but Misty froze up, like I'm sure most of us would in that situation. She even faked an asthma attack, but driver knew she was faking, telling her that if she really had asthma, she would have an inhaler. After some time watching her friend get SA'd by driver, Misty took action by grabbing the bat and hitting driver on the shoulder. Driver regained control by grabbing the bat from Misty and proceeded to brutally beat her with the bat until she lost consciousness. When Misty finally regained consciousness, she found herself laying beside her friend Tanya. Dazed, Misty told Tanya that they needed to get up, and she proceeded to make an attempt to walk home. Thankfully, Misty ended up stumbling into the hospital instead. It is said that Misty had a fist-sized hole in her head. It's amazing that she was even able to relay her horrifying ordeal to the nurses, who then called police. Tanya was not with Misty. Later that morning, 2 people who had been fishing in a canal 20 kilometers away had noticed the brutally battered naked body of Tanya. Now, my question is, so Misty recalled waking up laying beside Tanya. So if that statement is true, now not saying that Misty lied, but considering the state that she was in, I'm just wondering, was her account true? Was Tanya actually there? Did Misty just think she saw Tanya? I don't know. But if that's true, and Tanya was truly laying beside Misty when Misty regained consciousness, I guess that would mean that Driver had to have gone back later on to take Tanya and dump her body in the canal. Which I'm also sure that when he went back and saw that Misty was gone, he was probably shitting his pants is the best way I can describe it. The Chilliwack RCMP and Abbotsford Police formed a task force and immediately started their investigations. Misty would be transferred to the Royal Columbian Hospital with police protection due to swelling on the brain. Police would speak with other kids who Tanya and Misty were hanging out with that night, as well as other offenders who had been released from the federal penal institution nearby, and anyone else who had a record of SA. Stranger on stranger attacks are one of the hardest for police to solve. DNA was found during Tanya's autopsy, as well as other pieces of evidence. It was also determined that even though Tanya was brutally beaten, much like Misty, she ultimately died from being placed in the canal face down in the water. The police would keep a lot of the details of their investigation from the public to prevent false confessions. So that means that if Misty had been physically able to drag Tanya with her to the hospital, Tanya possibly could have also survived. This man was also a father of two. I know that he wasn't good to them either, but it is also sick to think that he had children of his own while he was out essaying and unaliving other people's children. I wasn't able to determine if Driver's children were males or females, or maybe one of each. So again, if you know something a little bit more about this part of the case, then please leave it in the comments. On October 18th, 1995, the police would receive a strange phone call from a then unidentified male who claimed that he had assisted Misty with getting to the hospital the night of the attacks. This call was traced to a payphone outside a local convenience store. At around 4:30 that same day, another call would come into police. This time, they were able to record it. Here's a clip of the recording.
Let you know who I am. Tanya's right. Tastes really good.
That recording, literally sends shivers down my spine. He just sounds so menacing. It's, ugh. Even though police were able to trace the second phone call to another payphone outside of an arena and immediately sent officers over to attempt to catch the caller, they were unable to find any evidence to indicate who had made the phone call. 2 hours later, another phone call would be made to 911. The caller made fun of the police for not being able to identify him. Here's a clip of this call.
You think I would be stupid enough to leave fingerprints behind when I make a phone call?
And then a fourth call would again be made to 911.
I'm the one. You're not giving me the chance to try and find me. I'll be cruising around looking for someone else.
This recording is a little bit hard to decipher, but if you listen closely, you can hear the caller saying, "I'm the one giving you the chance to try and find me. I'll be cruising around looking for someone else." The police had the media release a warning to the public to be extra careful and take precautions as they feared that this monster may strike again. A funeral for Tanya was held on October 21st, 1995. Police were there taking surveillance in hopes of finding her killer. Despite the fact that Driver had attended the funeral, police would not know this until much later. An RCMP profile from Ottawa would later be brought into the investigation to help come up with a profile to help police determine what type of monster would not only SA and unalive a teenager, brutally beat her friend, but also taunt the police afterwards. There would be another call placed to the police. He had mentioned biting the right nipple of Tanya. Driver appeared to be enjoying himself during these phone calls, especially the most recent call. It said that he sounded extremely excited, and it's possible that he may have been pleasuring himself during the call. This call was traced to a payphone outside a local bar. Again, no one had seen anyone using the payphone, and Driver was long gone by the time police had arrived. On November 6, 1995, the task force held a press conference to show a composite sketch that they had come up with based on Misty's description of her attacker. They also released small clips of the audio to the public in hopes that someone would recognize his voice. In addition to that, they set up an 800 number that would allow the public to listen to the audio clips again. However, if you called this number more than 3 times, the police would pay you a visit. Which, I mean, is completely understandable because I know, like, from all of the years of reading true crimes, watching true crimes, listening to other true crime podcasts, it's always said that these sickos get gratification and they, almost get a pleasure out of, like, revisiting the scenes or, like, probably in this case, he got a lot of gratification out of taunting the police. So, maybe he might have decided to listen to the recordings over and over and over again. Misty and her family would ultimately be placed in the witness protection program to ensure their safety while the police worked tirelessly to locate the perpetrator. As the investigators continued their interviews with various people, Driver would eventually go silent. Now, a lot of serial killers will go silent for a time. In this case, he went silent for only 4 months. He wouldn't make himself known again until February 17, 1996. Driver would call into a local radio station and tell the DJ that someone should go check the station's vehicle, as someone had done something to it. So the DJ went outside to see what was going on and found the gravestone of Tanya Smith on the hood of the car. Driver had written a list across the photo of Tanya on the stone. The list was as follows. She was not the first, she won't be the last. I'm still looking. One day, Misty. You won't find me. He also drew an arrow pointing to Tanya's right breast and wrote, quote, yummy T-word. Like, seriously, it's not enough that this monster had to take the life of an innocent child, that he now has to continue to use her as a pawn to taunt the public and the authorities. Like, just let this poor girl rest in peace. On February 19th, Driver would place yet another call.
Just to let you know who I am. Tanya's right tasted really good.
This time, when they went to investigate the location of the call, people had reported seeing a car in the area, but they had given a very vague description. A late 70s or early 80s beige car. Now, unfortunately, this vehicle description could point fingers towards tons of beige cars that were in the area at that time. It didn't exactly help narrow down anything. Not to mention, there was no evidence that this car was even involved with the phone calls. For all police knew was that it was just an innocent person who just happened to be driving by at the same time as the phone call. 2 days later, on February 21st, which is actually my birthday, a woman who was home alone with her children called the police because someone had thrown an object through the picture window at the front of her home. The object ended up being a large wrench with an envelope taped to it that said, "From the Abbey Killer, call 911. Police had located the wrench when they had arrived at the woman's home. When they opened the envelope, they found a note inside. Now, I want to issue another trigger warning here because the contents of this note is very disturbing and, again, can be very triggering to some people. Please also keep in mind that these are the words of the sick and deranged driver, and that I am just simply reading what he had written. The note read, quote, "Hello, it's me. Yes, sir. Tanya's right nipple sure did taste good. By the way, Tanya was wearing sandals that night, and I threw them with her other stuff. She wasn't a bad lay either. It was me that phoned from the Rotary that night. You cops getting a little pissed off yet? Hard to catch somebody who is smart, not like stupid crooks that are no minds. Here are a few more of my conquests. I told you it wasn't my first, and it won't be my last either. I don't stay with the same MO. I have done more after these ones also. Go figure out which ones. Look in BC, Alberta, and a few in Washington state. How some of you guys haven't clued into some of the incidents here in town the last couple of years. R.E. Borquin Crescent by McDonald's. Teen was attempted SA. I grabbed her breasts, was about to gag her when she took off on me. Oriole Drive. I almost had that woman beat senseless and was about to SA her when a car came along. I sure don't need to be seen. How about right across from the hospital? Hey, that was the same bat that was used on Misty and Tanya. As soon as I saw it was an Indian, I said no way, could have AIDS. So I took her backpack, found $200 in it, and threw it atop an old brick store. Hey guys, I'm bad. I will strike again one day. I will not be caught. I will not move from Abbotsford. Bye guys. This is the last time you'll hear from me. Until next time. Good luck. This letter just shows how sick and disgusting Driver had been. I'm actually a little bit nauseous reading those words out for you, but I did think that it was an important part of the case and shows Driver's true colors. This time Driver had been too cocky and slipped up. Police found a full fingerprint on the tape that was used to attach the note to the wrench. Unfortunately, when they ran the print through the database, nothing had come up because Driver had always been let off for his petty crimes he committed as a teen. The victim from the McDonald's would tell police that she hadn't seen her attacker's face, but he had a freckled arm with red hair. And she worked with a sketch artist to draw an anchor tattoo she observed on his arm. The victim from Oriole Drive had not seen her attacker at all because he had bashed her in the head from behind and ran away when the car had approached. The third victim in the note's attack was similar to the attack on Tanya. On August 5th, 1995, a woman had also stumbled into the same hospital that Missy had stumbled into. The woman was from Saskatchewan and was in Abbotsford with her boyfriend. Even though she was actually Norwegian, she was often mistaken for a native. She had apparently been drinking at a local bar when she and her boyfriend had gotten into an argument, so she left. She began to walk when she was unable to locate a taxi. That's when she was attacked by Driver. She was so badly injured that she has a large dent in her skull, as well as permanent brain damage. She's lost her sense of smell and her balance is unstable. She is unable to walk distances and unable to work. His attack has completely ruined her quality of life. April 30th, 1996, the police held another press conference. They had new recordings of the suspect's voice. They also distributed a new poster with all the identifying evidence that they had gathered, including the tattoo, the freckled arm, and the red hair. They would also announce a $40,000 reward for the capture of the assailant. Later that same day, a lady had called the police claiming that the voice sounds a lot like her son. She and her other son had listened to the audio and agreed that they should notify the police despite the fact that he didn't look much like the composite sketch. She provided the name of her son, Terry Driver, to the police. She stated that he liked to cruise around Abbotsford listening to his police scanner. Oh yes, I had actually forgotten about the scanner. This is likely how he was able to evade the police, and I'm sure he got sick satisfaction listening to the police run around on a wild goose chase trying to capture him. Police immediately went to Driver's house and waited for him to get home from work. But when they saw him, they agreed that they had to tread lightly because he didn't resemble the composite sketch. So they questioned Driver and asked him to provide his DNA, which of course he declined. A few days later, Driver would go to the police station with his lawyer, willing to provide fingerprints. Little did he know that the police had obtained a fingerprint from the tape that he had used on the wrench. It was a match. Driver was then arrested for the unaliving of Tanya Smith and attempted of Misty Cockrell. I would have loved to have seen his face when the police told him that his fingerprints had matched. I bet he was just about shitting himself, thinking that he had been so careful not leaving any evidence behind. All it takes is one slip. Driver denied that he had beaten the two girls. He said that he had just happened to come across the two girls after they had already been beaten by someone else, and that he had essayed the unconscious Tanya and then thrown her body in the canal. He then drove Misty to the hospital. Okay, so even if he stumbled across two unconscious girls, did he really think that essaying an unconscious teen would make him look any less of a monster? During his trial, even though he did not try to use an insanity plea, he stated that he had Tourette syndrome, obsessive compulsive disorder, and ADD, and asked that these impairments be taken into consideration to explain his actions. He would also claim that these disorders were why he had falsely confessed to the crimes. It really sickens me when people try to use a mental and or physical disability or illnesses to excuse horrific acts and claim that they weren't responsible. Not to mention, it puts more of a stigma to those who share these ailments and who are just trying to live their lives. Like, nobody deserves to be thought of in that way just because they have Tourette syndrome or obsessive compulsive or ADD or autism or anything, along those lines. It's sick. Driver had elected to be tried in front of a judge instead of a jury because of the emotional response that he knew would be inevitable during the trial. So I guess he thought that having a jury of, I don't even know how many, 30, 40 people. I don't know how many people juries usually consists of, but I guess his thought process behind that was that, these people are going to be affected by the emotional torment that I put all of these victims through, and they're likely going to give me a guilty verdict. And I guess he thought he had a better chance of just going one-on-one with a judge instead, thinking that they would be, I don't know, maybe lean towards his side a little bit more. I don't know what his thinking was behind it, to be completely honest. In 1997, Driver was convicted of first degree of Tanya and the attempted of Misty. He was declared a dangerous offender and received a mandatory life sentence. He would also be charged for the assaults on the two women he had mentioned in the letter attached to the wrench that he had thrown through the window. On August 23, 2021, Driver passed away while still in prison. So as always, I want to know your thoughts on this case. Is there anything else the police could have done to catch him sooner? What about those other victims that he attacked before Tanya and Misty? Were there no police reports on those? Don't forget to follow or subscribe so you don't miss out on next week's episode. Thanks for listening to Crime Time 911. Stay safe, stay curious, and remember to always trust your gut.